First of all, it was called a tea party, but we saw a lot of lamb being eaten there, and JC Leroux on the table as well. So it wasn't quite a tea party. But I think we should take it very seriously. I think what the former president said on Monday when Zuma came out with that statement, I think it was a huge moment. And because it was saying to the Constitutional Court, saying to the Zondo Commission, saying to the judiciary that you do not matter, that the rule of law does not matter. So I think this week was massive in that way, that a former president can actually say, we do not care about the institutions that safeguard democracy. So everything that happened this week was telling us that. So at the end of the week, then we see, during the week, obviously, then there was the communication that we saw on social media between Julius Malema and the former president. Then on Friday, there was that massive meeting. And I think it was funny because they call it a tea party and there was that interview. But I think it was significant that you have the leader of the opposition, not the leader of the opposition, but leader of a major opposition party, meeting with the former president. And by his side, the president has a member of the National Executive Committee and a senior person in the Gauteng region, in the Gauteng province of the ANC, lieutenants of Cyril Ramaphosa, if you might say, going to meet with an arch rival of Cyril Ramaphosa. So I think the significance of that meeting was that I think what you're beginning to see is a realignment of forces. In that Malema and Zuma, who despised each other, who still despise each other, actually sitting in one room. And the people who were with Malema, who were also in the room, who were Sandile and Tony Yengeni, who are not fans of Cyril Ramaphosa. So you're seeing kind of a beginning of a realignment of people who are opposed to the president of the Republic. But I think the two things that I think we must take away from there is, I think there was a genuine attempt by Julius Malema there to say the rule of law has to be respected. And I think there was an attempt to say, former president, you do need to go and appear before the Zondo Commission, because the rule of law has to be respected. We cannot have a situation where people are now saying that if a former president cannot respect the law, then why should we respect the law? And I think the second significant thing is what is now going to unfold. Is there going to be a do-nothing, a closer coming together of the so-called RET forces and the EFF, who are all have two common enemies, and the two common enemies are the Zondo Commission and the Ramaphosa administration.
Sure. Mr. Swana, let's come to you. And on those very last few words of Mondli Makhanya, RET forces coming together. And if you read, for example, the Sunday Times article on this story, they say the Nkandla event was no spontaneous Twitter idea, but well-planned. Does President Cyril Ramaphosa have reason to worry about the regrouping of this so-called RET forces within the ANC? And what element does the EFF bring to play here?
Thank you, Toli. We must remember that both Malema and Jacob Zuma actually have supporters inside the African National Congress generally, and also in the NEC in particular. Now, the big question here, more than Cyril Ramaphosa, the biggest issue that all of them have got to contend with, including Cyril Ramaphosa, is the issue of saying before now, let's say in the 2005 to 2009 era, when a legal problem arose for Jacob Zuma, maybe some other comrades, there was a political solution that was found. And that political solution was massive. It was a tsunami, as Vavi called it, which destroys the scorpions and eventually destroyed the security cluster in its entirety. In the current circumstances, I do not believe that you can rescue Zuma by trying to create chaos in the security cluster, in the judiciary, and so on. Zuma has got to go through the sentencing, trial and sentencing, and what Ramaphosa can only offer is a pardon after sentencing. And that's the issue that has got to be canvassed now. And I don't think Ramaphosa would be adverse to offering a pardon after sentencing. I think even the case of Sandile Lungisa in PE in the Nelson Mandela Bay demonstrates that comrades are still able to accommodate each other in matters of
Mondli Makhanya, do you agree with that? That once everything has come to a conclusion, in all probability, the former president may face some kind of a prosecution post the Zondo Commission, and then it'll be up to President Ramaphosa to offer him a pardon, a presidential pardon, if you will. Is that something that you think might be in the offing?
Yeah, well, I think even before we get to the cases that will emerge from the Zondo Commission, what is going to happen is that there's a case that the former president is currently facing in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. And that is going to play out during the course of this year. And if there is a conviction, I think that's the big decision that the current president is going to have to face. I'm like, do you let a former president go to prison, or do you pardon him, or do you place him under house arrest? And that's a decision the actual decision about the sentencing is out of his hand. And he, as Sandile says, that has to go through its own process. Yeah. And then only can he take a political and executive decision. And then you'll get to cases that will emerge from the Zondo Commission. And those, there are definitely going to be cases. And the cases that will emerge from the Zondo Commission are going to be a heck of a lot more serious than the cases that he is facing in relation to his relationship with Shabir Sheikh and Thales. And those cases will be very heavy because he was a sitting president at that particular point and he took decisions. We know the decisions and how criminal his relationship with the Gupta family will have been. But again, a signal that Cyril Ramaphosa will have to send to the Republic is, if you are powerful, are you able to escape a prison sentence? If you have connections, are you able to escape a prison sentence? Why must I, as a bank robber and a fraudster who stole money from FNB, why must I serve a prison sentence when a person who has actually done a much bigger crime does not do so? So there's going to be a major decision in terms of Cyril Ramaphosa's own legacy, because I think out of the cases that will arise from Zondo Commission, I'm no lawyer, so I cannot prejudge, but I think there is so much that has emerged from there that the former president will have to answer.
You speak about
is something that will be quite a certainty.
Yeah, you speak about the legacy of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Is that something that needs to be uppermost in his mind as he goes about his presidential duties? I mean, Mr. Swana is suggesting the offering of a pardon should Zuma be found guilty in any way, shape or form. I'm just wondering about this, and perhaps let's take a focus inside the ANC's own factional battles. You have the Secretary General, Ace Makhashule, right now talking about how we as South Africans perhaps need not worry much about the Constitution, and perhaps the attention should be around why Zuma is, we are worried about Zuma. Can we leave Zuma alone? I'm trying to get a sense from you, Mondli Makhanya, as to whether or not the suggestions being made by your paper that the Secretary General of the ANC, Ace Makhashule, is probably going to be the next significant figure to go and coalesce around former President Zuma in Nkandla, and what that will mean inside the ANC, in particular, the top six.
What we do know is that from the day that Cyril Ramaphosa was elected president of the ANC, the supporters of Jacob Zuma have wanted him out, and they have not stopped fighting with him ever since then. And they definitely want him out. And now that there are criminal charges pending against certain people, that tempo has gone up a heck of a lot. So they definitely want him out. And the plan was to have him out by the time the NGC would have happened last year, but obviously that didn't happen, and there's an NGC planned this year. And I think there's definitely a certainty that they want him out. And if they do not get him out now, they will certainly make sure that he becomes a one-term president and they get him out in 2022.
Yeah.
It's next year when he has his next conference. So what he should be worrying about really is South Africa. He worries too much about the unity of the ANC. He worries about his own position in the ANC. And there are so many things that need to be fixed. And in order to fix those things, I think he needs to focus on governance. And he actually has to be taking on those people who are frustrating and retarding the rebuilding of the republic.
Yeah. Mr. Swana, and I think that's a good point for you to come in. The President, Cyril Ramaphosa, he ought to be worrying right now about governance issues. There are so many issues that he needs to worry about. That includes the economic reconstruction and recovery plan that he has put together. But how does he do that effectively when, in all probability, he has people that he leads in his cabinet that are very much pro-Zuma, as Zuma himself said, in fact, in that Monday letter, that he not only enjoys support from ANC leaders and members, but also cabinet ministers. How does he do that effectively? How does he lead a government with a divided governing party?
My concern here is that I actually do not know what it is that Cyril is being prevented from doing in terms of doing his job and actually implementing an economic recovery program. As an example, Thabo Mbeki has wrote before the 2019 election that the NDP is not a plan, and Cyril was very instrumental in developing that NDP. The NDP is not a plan, it is a thumb suck, it cannot be action. Very recently, very recently, in the past 7 days or so, I was reading the publication by the Thabo Mbeki Foundation that there is still no viable economic plan coming from the government of South Africa. Now, I'm not even talking about implementation of any plan. I'm talking about a plan that is credible. Thabo Mbeki is a university-trained economist up to master's level. So and he has run the best economy in South Africa more than anybody else that we know of. So when he says there is no plan, we need to get worried. So Cyril would have to answer and say, why is there no plan? Why can't he write a plan and put it in place? We're not even talking about implementation and performance against that plan. And the issues of job creation and fighting unemployment. What did Makhanya actually do to stop Cyril from implementing, together with business, those plans of job creation? What stopped him? So I think we need to take it with a pinch of salt, this notion that there are people who are opposing. Every president, whether you are Trump or Biden, every president has got to contend with contentious forces all over the show, but he must make a success of his life. So I think we must be careful of condoning mediocrity, disguising it in the whole factional battles of the ANC. I think there's more to this about the man himself that he needs to answer for, and not disguise his mediocrity in factional battles.
Sure. That's very harsh right there. Gentlemen, can I ask that the two of you remain exactly where you are? We're going to take a breather. When we return, we're going to look ahead to what we can expect from the State of the Nation address. Mondli Makhanya, let's bring you in. The President will deliver the State of the Nation address on Thursday. One caption I've seen from the Sunday Times front pages, it's going to be a sad State of the Nation that will be presented by the President. But I still cannot get over the remarks made by Sandile Swana that President Cyril Ramaphosa needs to stop masking the mediocrity that perhaps have characterized his leadership thus far in government, and he needs to stop hiding behind the factional battles that are playing themselves out in the ANC. Do you concur with those sentiments?
Yeah, I totally concur. Cyril Ramaphosa won the elections, well, him and his party, but he won a mandate with 57% of the vote of South Africans. And the South Africans told him that he must govern and he must take South Africa in a certain direction, in a different direction from what was there in the past, and implement what needs to be implemented. So there is nothing stopping him as the president of the Republic, acting as the president of the Republic. Yes, there are issues happening in the ANC and people will oppose you, people will fight with you, alliance members will fight with you, but you need not keep looking over your shoulder and keep looking back and saying, what is so-and-so going to be thinking? As Sandile correctly pointed out, in 1996, yes, it was Mandela's era, but Thabo Mbeki, we know how powerful Thabo Mbeki was at the time. The government of the time took a huge decision to implement GEAR, and against massive opposition in the ANC, and particularly among the allies of the ANC, the SSCP and COSATU, and elsewhere. And though that tough decision was taken, that tough decision actually brought us back from the brink, basically, as a result of the debt that the apartheid government had left us. And it actually left the government with a lot of room to do a lot of like social development, social grants and so on. And there was money in the kitty and we were able to, and the economy grew. And so you do not need to have full buy-in from your political party to do what you need to do because you are constitutionally empowered to do so. So Cyril Ramaphosa keep telling us that the factionalism in the ANC is stopping him from doing his job. He actually has to do his job. And that is where the issue of backbone and vision comes in. If it means he serves a one-term presidency, it's fine, but he will have set the country on a different trajectory.
Well, Mr. Swana, having heard those sentiments, what does he need to tell the nation then against the background that we've painted politically, but also now at a governance level? You have a COSATU that still is firmly in his corner, but is extremely unhappy about some of the governance decisions that are taken. For example, the wage agreement that could not be concluded, at least the last leg, and workers very angry about that. But then again, the president has to stand up and be on the side of his finance minister in Treasury, who says, well, there simply is no money to give you a raise. What does the president need to tell the nation against the background that you gentlemen have painted here today?
I think that personally, in the build-up to the last family meeting, if we may call those things, these COVID-19 meetings, I very much enjoyed the contribution of the unions, because the unions in the build-up to that meeting were quantifying, for instance, the jobs that are at risk in the tourism. I use the word tourism as broadly as possible, in the tourism sector, liquor and so on, hotels and what have you. And they were advising what must be done to conserve those jobs. Right now, I think it is quite possible for Cyril and business and the union to find a common ground to say, guys, right now we have only two tasks. One is to conserve the jobs with the money that we have, conserve the jobs that are there. Number two, any little surplus that is left, create new jobs. So from a governance point of view, there are only two issues Cyril Ramaphosa has got to address. One, decisions about COVID-19, the disease itself and the pandemic. Two, the economic pandemic. And I think there is plenty of room now to move economically together with the unions and the employers. I think everybody knows that this is not a time for luxuries, it's not a time for fat, it is a time for survival. And he needs to lead in that direction decisively.
Mr. Makhanya, your Swana prospects, what should the president tell the nation at a time when I think everyone is just demoralized?
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, that everyone is so demoralized. So the president actually has to put forward a very positive tone and give people hope. the vaccines have arrived. So he actually can tell a good news story. Then the first wave of vaccines have arrived. And he can tell the story. The numbers, the infection numbers are going down. He needs to be telling that story. But then he has to tell the tougher story about the economy. That the economy is in a dire state, and we all have to make sacrifices. And the biggest sacrifice, I think, will also obviously have to come from the public unions. I mean, like, they actually have to step back, because know that the fiscus cannot support their demands at this particular point in time. And that has to be put firmly. And he has to own that decision and not just make it as a Ditomboweni project. He actually has to be the one to say, no, this cannot be. And I think, with the economic recovery plan, there has to be meat to it. He has to actually say, this is what is going to happen. This is what must happen. And these are the steps that we as a government and the private sector will have to take in order to achieve the economic recovery. So I think it has to be, this is going to be a health and economic state of the nation address.
Mondli Makhanya and Sandile Swana, my thanks to you both, gentlemen, for engaging in this conversation. Perhaps I would be remiss in my duties here if I don't give you each a very, very quick soundbite on perhaps the biggest story of the week that we are missing here, and that is the SIU report. The SIU head, I've never heard a government official begging fellow colleagues to stop corruption. Mondli, let's start with you.
Yeah, and that is actually, that was the low point in our country. I mean, like, we've had many low points, but I think the fact that people stole from a fund, from funds, from monies that were dedicated to saving lives, and what they saw were business opportunities, and not just business opportunities, but looting opportunities. And I think that takes us to the next thing, that the vaccines are going to be here. I mean, like, the vaccine rollout is here, and already you are hearing talk among entrepreneurs and ANC-aligned business people, and even the ANC's own Progressive Business Forum, and even the president himself, in his speech to the Progressive Business Forum, saying that there will be opportunities in the rollout of vaccines. Who are we as a people to be even talking about opportunities in a time when we should be talking about saving lives and preventing people from getting sick and dying?
Yeah.
And I think we have actually plunged to really, really low depths as a republic. And the SIU head actually summed it up very well.
Sure. Sandile Swana, last word.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think those are the things that almost reduce me to tears, those types of reports of the SIU, the recent one, and the 7-year reports of the Auditor General, pointing in the same direction. All I can say in truthfulness is that let us return to Mandela's rejuvenation of the soul, the RDP of the soul. Number 2, let us build state institutions, which is what is allowing this corruption to continue. Build morals, build institutions. That is what I can say.
Sandile Swana and Mondli Makhanya, my thanks to you for your time.